Have you ever wondered what secrets about consciousness and healing were revealed in the final whispers of one of the most profound spiritual teachers of the 20th century? What if the key to unlocking your true spiritual potential has been hiding in plain sight all along? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. In the quiet moments of his transition from this world, Joel Goldsmith shared revelations so profound, so contradictory to traditional religious teachings, that they would fundamentally transform how we understand spiritual healing and consciousness itself. Has this ever happened to you? You study spiritual principles for years, practice all the right techniques, yet still feel something essential is missing from your practice. Joel's journey wasn't just about learning more spiritual concepts. It was about discovering how consciousness itself becomes the healing force that dissolves all limitation instantly. After decades of helping thousands through spiritual healing, writing revolutionary books, and studying with mystics, something remained hidden from Joel until those precious final moments when clarity struck like lightning through his awareness. What Joel realized in those sacred final days contradicts everything that conventional religion and even modern spirituality teaches. It goes beyond positive thinking, beyond prayer as most know it, beyond visualization and affirmation techniques. Stay with me until the end, because this revelation isn't just another spiritual philosophy. It's the master key that makes every other practice work effortlessly. The fundamental principle that anchored Joel's teachings was deceptively simple. I of myself can do nothing. The Father within doeth the works. Many spiritual seekers have heard this phrase, nodded in agreement, and then continued struggling with the same problems and limitations. What you're about to discover might surprise you, because Joel's final breakthrough wasn't just understanding this principle intellectually, but discovering how to activate it instantly in your life. Most of us approach spirituality like a cosmic vending machine. Insert enough prayer, meditation, and positive thinking, and eventually receive healing, abundance, and happiness. But what if everything we've been taught about spiritual transformation is backward? What if the very effort to become more spiritual is precisely what blocks true transformation from happening? Joel discovered that most seekers, including himself for many years, were trying to use consciousness to get something from God. They were approaching the spiritual path as if they were separate from divine consciousness, needing to bridge a gap that doesn't actually exist. The revelation that changed everything was the complete opposite approach. A recognition so simple that the intellectual mind dismisses it as too easy, yet so profound that it works when nothing else will. Imagine for a moment what would happen if you stopped trying to become spiritually enlightened and instead recognized that spirituality is already trying to express itself as you. This isn't about becoming anything new. It's about, if these teachings resonate with you, hit that subscribe button to join our community of seekers exploring consciousness and spiritual transformation. This isn't about becoming anything new. It's about recognizing what you've always been beneath the layers of conditioning and false identity. This recognition is the master key Joel discovered, the key that transforms every aspect of your life: health, relationships, abundance. Not through struggle or effort, but through alignment with your true nature. When I first encountered this revelation in Joel's work, it felt like someone had just turned on the lights in a room where I'd been fumbling around in the dark. The hidden truth was that I'd been approaching my spiritual journey completely backward. Perhaps you've experienced this too. The exhausting cycle of spiritual seeking that never quite delivers the profound transformation we hope for. Joel's breakthrough was realizing that this master key makes all other spiritual practices work effortlessly. It's not that affirmations, visualizations, or meditation techniques are wrong. It's that without this fundamental shift in perspective, they remain surface-level tools that rarely create lasting change. They're like trying to fix a computer's hardware by changing the desktop background. The profound mindset shift Joel uncovered was that most of us are approaching spirituality incorrectly. We treat consciousness like a cosmic vending machine. Insert enough prayer, meditation, and positive thinking, and eventually receive healing, abundance, and happiness. We're trying to use consciousness to get something from God, as if we're separate beings negotiating with a distant power. But the journey Joel invites us to take flips this approach completely. Instead of trying to reach out to consciousness, what if you recognize that you already are the consciousness you seek? This isn't spiritual theory. It's a practical recognition that changes how you navigate every aspect of your life. Think about the revelations that come when you stop seeing yourself as a person with problems trying to connect with God, and instead recognize yourself as the very consciousness in which all experiences, including problems, arise and dissolve naturally. This doesn't mean your challenges magically disappear, but your relationship to them transforms completely. What makes this approach so impactful is that it works, whether you believe it or not, whether you feel worthy or not, whether you understand it completely or not. Truth operates regardless of our opinions about it or our feelings of readiness. Your true nature as consciousness isn't waiting for you to become good enough to claim it. It's already what you are, waiting only for recognition. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring how this recognition isn't just philosophical, it's intensely practical. Joel discovered that every healing, every demonstration of abundance, every moment of deep peace comes through one simple practice. It's a practice so natural that you've been using it unconsciously your whole life, yet so powerful that when accessed deliberately, it transforms everything. Write in the comments, "I am consciousness," if this perspective shift is starting to resonate with how you view your spiritual journey. This simple practice, Joel discovered, reveals a revolutionary insight. The secret isn't about getting health or attracting abundance, but recognizing that you already are what you seek. Most spiritual approaches focus on acquisition, getting something you lack, healing something that's broken, attracting something you desire. But Joel's revelation turns this entire paradigm on its head. When you recognize that you don't need to get health because you already are perfect life expressing, you don't need to attract abundance because you already are infinite supply, the entire framework of spirituality shifts from effort to recognition. This isn't about asking, begging, demanding, or even affirming. It's about recognizing the I am that has always been present behind every problem, every lack, every fear, waiting patiently to dissolve them all through simple recognition. The breakthrough moment in your journey comes when you realize this isn't intellectual understanding. It's direct recognition of what has always been true about your essential nature. Behind the narrative of limitation is the reality of completeness, waiting only for your acknowledgement. Joel's final wisdom, whispered in what was described as the sacred silence of his transition, contains this master key that unlocks every spiritual mystery you've ever encountered. The revelation is so beautifully simple that most people miss it entirely. Stop trying to be spiritual and recognize that spirituality is trying to be you. The mindset shift here is profound. Most of us spend our lives in pursuit mode, chasing spiritual growth, development, and enlightenment as if these were achievements to be earned through discipline and practice. We approach spirituality like a mountain to be climbed through effort and perseverance. But what if the summit is already where you're standing? This simple recognition aligns you with what you already are. It's not about becoming anything. It's about dropping the pretense that you're anything less than the consciousness in which all experience arises. The technique is so simple that the intellectual mind rejects it as too easy, yet so profound that it works when nothing else will. Behind the scenes of your everyday awareness lies this extraordinary truth. You are not a limited human being trying to become spiritual. You are spiritual consciousness expressing as a human being. The hidden revelation isn't that you need to transform into something better, it's that you need to stop believing you're something less. This recognition creates an immediate impact because it aligns you with reality rather than with the story of separation and lack. It's not positive thinking or wishful imagination. It's seeing clearly what has always been true beneath the temporary appearances of limitation. Subscribe now to continue this journey of discovering your true nature as consciousness itself. We're exploring these profound insights that can transform your entire experience of life. Let me share how this recognition operates in real life through the stories of people who've experienced its transformative power. These aren't theoretical concepts, but lived experiences that demonstrate what happens when someone stops trying to use spirituality to fix their problems and instead recognizes their true identity as consciousness itself. Type "I recognize" in the comments if you're beginning to see how this shift from seeking to recognizing could transform your approach to spiritual growth. Let me share how this recognition manifests in real life through the stories of people who've experienced its transformative power. What's truly remarkable about Joel's final approach is its radical accessibility. Unlike complex spiritual systems that demand years of study, purification, or special qualifications, this revelation bypasses all that struggle by revealing a simple truth. You are the divine consciousness you've been seeking. Most people spend years studying spiritual texts, learning elaborate techniques, trying to purify themselves enough to deserve divine attention. The spiritual marketplace is filled with systems promising enlightenment after sufficient effort and dedication. But Joel discovered that the journey doesn't need to be so complicated. This shift in consciousness can be made by anyone without years of preparation or special qualifications. The revelation is that every person carries within them the complete solution to every problem they will ever face. Not as potential that might develop someday, but as present reality waiting to be acknowledged through a specific shift in consciousness that anyone can make regardless of their spiritual background. What makes this approach so revolutionary is that it doesn't depend on your level of faith, your spiritual development, or your worthiness. The hidden truth is that consciousness healing operates through recognition of what you already are, not through becoming something you're not yet. This is why those who appear to have no spiritual background sometimes experience more dramatic transformations than long-time seekers. They have fewer spiritual concepts blocking direct recognition. The practice involves a profound mindset shift from being the person who has the problem to being the consciousness that dissolves it. This shift works whether you believe it or not, whether you feel worthy or not, whether you understand it completely or not. Truth operates regardless of our opinions about it or our feelings of readiness. Behind the scenes of every healing is this fundamental shift in identity. When Margaret, who carried 20 years of chronic pain that no doctor could explain or heal, encountered Joel's teaching, she didn't change the pain itself. She changed her relationship to it. Within minutes of learning Joel's technique, she stopped being Margaret with pain and became pure awareness, observing an experience that couldn't touch her true nature. 3 days later, she woke without pain for the first time in decades. The profound decision she made wasn't to heal the pain, but to recognize her identity as consciousness itself. the awareness that remains forever untouched by any physical or emotional experience passing through it, like clouds through an endless sky. The pain didn't dissolve because she found a better treatment. It dissolved because she discovered who she really was beyond the story of suffering. This recognition isn't a form of spiritual bypassing or denial. It's seeing clearly what has always been true beneath temporary appearances. When Robert faced financial ruin, after his business collapsed, he didn't ignore the practical problems. He approached them from his true identity as consciousness rather than from desperation. If you've ever experienced a moment where a problem suddenly lost its grip on you without anything external changing, comment, "I felt this shift." You've already experienced this recognition, even if momentarily. Let me take you deeper into Margaret's story. For 20 years, she lived with chronic pain that defined her entire existence. She tried everything: medications that eventually stopped working, surgeries that only made things worse, alternative therapies that offered temporary relief before the pain returned even stronger. Medical specialists couldn't explain her condition, and psychology offered no lasting solution. Her identity had become completely wrapped up in being a person with chronic pain. What happened when she encountered Joel's teaching wasn't a new treatment for her pain. It was a revelation about her relationship to it. Within minutes of learning the technique, Margaret experienced a profound identity shift. The pain remained exactly the same physically, but she no longer identified herself as Margaret with pain. Instead, she recognized herself as pure awareness, observing an experience that couldn't touch her true nature. This wasn't positive thinking or denial. It was recognition of a deeper reality that had always been true, but had been obscured by her identification with suffering. 3 days later, she woke without pain for the first time in decades. The transformation wasn't just physical, but existential. She had discovered who she really was, beyond all temporary conditions. Robert's journey reveals another dimension of this practice. After losing everything in a business collapse that destroyed his reputation and left his family facing foreclosure, he was drowning in shame and desperation. He understood spiritual principles intellectually. He could quote scripture about abundance and affirm prosperity daily, but these practices remained intellectual exercises that couldn't bridge the gap to his practical reality of mounting bills and dwindling resources. The breakthrough came when Robert stopped trying to fix his circumstances from the position of a desperate person and started recognizing himself as the consciousness in which both prosperity and poverty appear as temporary experiences, neither touching his true infinite nature. This wasn't escaping into spiritual fantasy. It was seeing clearly what had always been true beneath the appearance of limitation. Within weeks, unexpected opportunities emerged seemingly from nowhere. Former clients returned with new projects. New partnerships formed naturally, but the real transformation wasn't the external circumstances. It was Robert's unshakable peace, knowing that his true identity as infinite consciousness could never be threatened by any financial condition. Revolutionary insight behind both these journeys is that they didn't become more spiritual or develop new powers through practice and discipline. They simply recognized what had always been true, but temporarily forgotten. They are the very consciousness they had been seeking to contact, please, or convince to help them with their problems. This recognition creates a profound paradigm shift in how we approach challenges. Instead of seeing problems as threats to overcome through effort, we recognize them as temporary experiences arising in consciousness, our true identity. This doesn't mean ignoring practical action, but taking that action from a completely different starting point, from wholeness rather than lack, from peace rather than desperation. Sarah's story offers yet another perspective on how this recognition transforms our relationship with emotions that seem to control our lives completely. After years of struggling with depression that medication couldn't lift and therapy couldn't permanently cure, comment, recognition shifted everything. If you've experienced a moment where seeing yourself differently transformed a situation without anything external changing, Sarah's story offers yet another perspective on how this recognition transforms our relationship with emotions that seem to control our lives completely. After years of struggling with depression that medication couldn't lift and therapy couldn't permanently cure, Sarah felt trapped in a mind she couldn't escape or heal. The depression wasn't just sadness, it was a heavy blanket of hopelessness that made simple daily activities feel overwhelming. She had tried everything: antidepressants, therapy, exercise, meditation, yet nothing provided lasting relief from the mental anguish. Her breakthrough came when she encountered Joel's teaching about consciousness recognition. Rather than fighting the depression or trying to replace negative thoughts with positive ones, Sarah learned something revolutionary. She could stop identifying with the depressed thoughts and emotions and start identifying with the awareness that observes them. This shift in perspective wasn't about escaping her feelings or denying their existence. It was about discovering her true position as the consciousness in which all mental states arise and dissolve naturally. The depression didn't vanish overnight, but Sarah's relationship to it transformed immediately. She discovered an inner stillness that no mood could disturb, the I am that exists prior to all psychological states and remains eternally free from every condition that seems to control human experience. What makes this approach so different from conventional treatments is that it doesn't try to fix what's wrong with you. Instead, it reveals what's eternally right about your true nature as consciousness itself. Sarah didn't become someone who manages depression well. She recognized herself as the awareness in which depression appears and disappears without defining her essential being. To support this recognition, Joel taught what he called the witness position, a practice of observing experiences from the unchanging center of awareness rather than being caught in them completely. This creates immediate space between you and any problem or limitation that seems to control your life. It's the difference between saying, "I am depressed," and "I notice depression appearing in consciousness." You can practice this right now. Notice that you are aware of hearing these words. You are not the words themselves, not the thoughts about them, not even the person listening to them, but the awareness in which all of these appear. This awareness is your true identity, infinite, eternal, and inherently free from every temporary condition. The witness position isn't detachment or dissociation from life. It's actually the most intimate connection possible, recognizing yourself as the very consciousness in which all experiences arise, unfold, and dissolve naturally without resistance. From this vantage point, problems don't disappear, but they lose their power to define who you are or limit your sense of possibility. This recognition creates a profound inner freedom that transcends circumstances. You're no longer at the mercy of changing conditions because your identity isn't based on conditions at all. You're the unchanging awareness in which all conditions appear, the canvas rather than the painting, the sky rather than the weather. But Joel discovered that most people encounter a predictable challenge when attempting to maintain this recognition in daily life. If you've ever experienced moments where you suddenly realized, "I am not my thoughts," or "I am not this emotion," share "I am the witness" in the comments. But Joel discovered that most people encounter a predictable challenge when attempting to maintain this recognition in daily life. We've been conditioned to identify with our thoughts and emotions for so long that we automatically slip back into that identification, especially under pressure. Joel's discovery of the timeless awareness technique offers a profound solution to this challenge. Joel taught that every problem exists only in time, while your true nature exists outside of time altogether. Think about it. Worry requires a future that hasn't happened yet. Regret requires a past that no longer exists, and both depend entirely on time-bound thinking. When you shift your identity from the time-bound person to timeless awareness, problems lose their reality and power to affect your essential being. This isn't a mental trick or positive affirmation. It's recognizing the fundamental nature of consciousness itself, eternally present, outside the stream of time in which problems appear to exist. When you feel your way into this present moment so completely that past and future disappear entirely, what problem could possibly exist? What lack could be real? What fear could have any foundation when only the eternal now is present? The revolutionary insight is that this timeless awareness isn't something you need to achieve through years of meditation. It's your natural state of being, always available, always perfect, always free from every condition that seems to trouble the time-bound mind. The more you rest in this timeless awareness, the more naturally your life reflects this perfection in practical ways. To deepen this recognition, Joel developed what he called the recognition-gratitude approach, a practice that completely transforms our understanding of gratitude itself. Most approaches to gratitude focus on being thankful for what we have or hope to receive in the future. But Joel's approach was radically different, using gratitude not as a feeling or emotion, but as recognition of what already is. Instead of being thankful for what you hope to receive in the future, you become grateful for the completeness that already exists within you right now. This isn't positive thinking designed to attract good things. It's acknowledgement of the infinite supply, perfect health, and unlimited love that consciousness itself is. The profound revelation here is that you don't have these qualities as possessions. You are these qualities expressing as individual awareness. When you say, "I am grateful that I am infinite supply itself," or "I am grateful that I am perfect health itself," you're not making affirmations about what you want to become. You're acknowledging facts about your present nature. This recognition-gratitude bypasses the usual spiritual trap of seeking to become what you already are. It establishes you immediately in the truth of your being and allows that truth to express naturally in your daily experience without force or struggle. The hidden truth is that gratitude isn't about thanking a power outside yourself. It's recognizing the power that you already are. Let me show you how these practices work together to establish you more firmly in the recognition of your true nature as consciousness itself. Write in the comments, "Timeless now," if you've ever experienced a moment of such complete presence that all your problems temporarily disappeared. Let me show you how these practices work together to establish you more firmly in the recognition of your true nature as consciousness itself. Even with perfect understanding of these principles, most people encounter predictable obstacles that can temporarily derail their practice. Joel faced these same challenges and developed specific insights about working with them that transformed obstacles into opportunities. The first common obstacle is doubt. The mind's insistence that this approach is too simple to work for serious problems like chronic illness, financial ruin, or deep emotional trauma. When we've been conditioned to believe that meaningful change requires struggle and effort, the simplicity of consciousness recognition can trigger skepticism. But here's the revolutionary perspective Joel discovered. Doubt is natural and doesn't disqualify you from success. Instead of fighting doubt or trying to eliminate it through positive thinking, Joel learned to welcome it as another experience arising in consciousness. When doubt appears, you can simply notice, "I am aware of doubt arising in consciousness." You are not the doubt. You are the consciousness in which doubt appears and disappears naturally like clouds in an endless sky. This insight transforms doubt from an enemy into a signpost, showing you where you're still identified with the person mind rather than resting in your true nature. Another frequent challenge is impatience with external progress. Students often abandon the practice when immediate physical or financial changes don't appear, not realizing that inner transformation always precedes outer demonstration. The breakthrough insight is understanding that consciousness shift happens instantly when recognition occurs, but its reflection in the world of form may unfold gradually according to a timeline beyond personal control. The key decision point is maintaining recognition regardless of external appearances or seeming delays. This isn't passive waiting but active recognition that you are consciousness itself, not a person waiting for consciousness to improve your circumstances. From this perspective, you already have everything, because you are everything expressed. As individual awareness, perhaps the most persistent obstacle Joel identified is the habit of returning to problem consciousness under pressure. When faced with challenging situations, we automatically revert to identifying with the person who has problems, rather than the consciousness that dissolves them. This isn't spiritual failure. It's normal human conditioning. Each return to problem consciousness becomes an opportunity to practice recognition again, deepening your journey toward consistent identification with your true nature. Joel's ultimate realization brings together all aspects of consciousness recognition into a unified understanding that transcends every limitation. He discovered that consciousness is not something you have or use like a tool, but what you are at the deepest level of being. Every problem, every limitation, every fear exists only in the mistaken belief that you are something other than pure awareness itself expressing as individual consciousness. From this recognition flows natural healing, effortless supply, and unshakable peace, not as rewards for spiritual achievement, but as the natural expression of your true nature finally recognized and lived authentically. If you've been experiencing a sense of recognition while hearing these teachings, type "I am consciousness" in the comments to affirm this truth about yourself. As we come to the close of our exploration into Joel Goldsmith's profound insights, I hope you've glimpsed the revolutionary simplicity of his final understanding. The truth is, this recognition of your essential nature as consciousness itself isn't something you achieve through years of effort. It's what you already are beneath all appearances. If something within you resonated with these teachings, if you felt a quiet yes arising as you heard about shifting from person identification to consciousness recognition, it's because truth recognizes itself. Your true nature is already recognizing its reflection in these words. I'd love to continue this journey of discovery with you. If you found value in these insights, subscribe to join our community of consciousness explorers. We're diving deep into these transformative understandings every week, uncovering the practical applications of spiritual truth in everyday life. If you've made it all the way here with me, drop "consciousness recognized" in the comments. I read every comment and would love to hear which aspect of Joel's teaching resonated most deeply with you. And if this conversation opened something new for you, a simple like helps these teachings reach others who might be searching for exactly this understanding. Right over here, you'll find a video exploring how to apply consciousness recognition specifically to health challenges. It's the perfect companion to today's exploration. Click on it now, and let's continue this journey together as we discover how recognizing your true nature transforms every aspect of life. Remember, you are not a person trying to become spiritual. You are spiritual consciousness expressing as a human being. That recognition changes everything. What if everything you've been taught about achieving success, finding happiness, and securing your future is actually the very thing keeping you from it? What if the you that's struggling, striving, and suffering isn't the real you at all, but merely a pretender, a false claimant to the throne of your consciousness? Today we explore the most radical and liberating truth that spiritual teachers have whispered for centuries but that our culture desperately tries to silence: the necessity of dying to self. The great deception. We live in a world that worships the personal self. Every advertisement, every self-help program, every achievement-oriented philosophy tells you to build yourself up, assert yourself, promote yourself, defend yourself. You are number one, they declare. Look out for yourself first. And so we spend our entire lives constructing this elaborate edifice called me, my success, my security, my reputation, my rights, my opinions, my future. But here is the truth that changes everything. This personal sense of self, this me that we protect and promote so fiercely, is the very source of all our suffering. Think about it. Every fear you experience comes from this separate self. Every anxiety about the future, every resentment about the past, every comparison that leaves you feeling inadequate. All of these arise from the belief that you are a separate, vulnerable entity that must fight for its survival and success in a hostile or indifferent world. The masters of mystical wisdom, from ancient times to the present, have pointed to a single transformative principle: the personal self must die so that the true self may live. What is this self that must die? Let us be clear about what we mean. We are not speaking of physical death, nor are we advocating the destruction of individual identity or the loss of personality. What must die is the false sense of separation, the illusion that you are merely a body-mind organism, isolated and alone, dependent entirely on your own efforts and resources. This false self has many faces. It is the voice in your head that constantly judges and compares. It is the worry that tells you that you are not enough, that you don't have enough, that you need to protect what little you have. It is the pride that needs to be right, to be recognized, to be validated by others. It is the fear that believes it can lose something precious, that disaster lurks around every corner, that you must control every circumstance to be safe. This self is built entirely on thought, on concepts, beliefs, memories, and projections. It has no reality except what we give it through constant mental activity. It is like a character in a dream who believes itself to be real, separate from the dreamer, the doorway to freedom. Now here is where our teaching takes a turn that may surprise you. Dying to self is not about self-denial or self-punishment. It is not about becoming weak or passive. It is not about eliminating desire or becoming emotionally numb. Dying to self is about awakening to what you really are. When you begin to see through the illusion of the separate self, you discover something remarkable. You are not merely a wave struggling in the ocean. You are the ocean expressing as a wave. You are not a separate fragment of consciousness trying to survive in the universe. You are the very consciousness in which the universe appears. This recognition changes everything. When the false self begins to dissolve, you find that you don't become nothing. You become everything. You don't lose power. You discover that real power has nothing to do with personal force. You don't become poor. You realize you have access to an infinite supply that was always present, but hidden by your belief in limitation. The practical path. How does one die to self? Not through struggle, for struggle reinforces the very self we seek to transcend. Not through suppression, for what we resist persists. The death of self happens through understanding, through awareness, through the simple practice of noticing. Begin by observing your thoughts without identification. When fear arises, don't say, "I am afraid." Say instead, "There is fear appearing in consciousness." When desire arises, don't say, "I want this." Observe instead, there is wanting happening. This subtle shift creates space between the true you, pure awareness, and the movements of the personal self. Practice what I call the pause of consciousness. In any moment of stress or struggle, stop, take a breath, ask yourself, what if I don't have to figure this out? What if there is an intelligence greater than my personal thinking that already knows the answer? Then wait in that space of not knowing, that sacred emptiness where divine intelligence can flow. Living by grace as you begin to die to self, something miraculous happens. You discover grace. Grace is what flows when personal effort ceases. It is the invisible hand that guides you when you stop trying to control every outcome. It is the provision that appears when you stop believing that your security depends entirely on your own efforts. This doesn't mean you become lazy or passive. Rather, your action becomes inspired rather than driven. You move from a place of inner stillness rather than anxiety. You find that you can work without struggle, achieve without stress, give without depletion. The masters of the spiritual life have discovered this secret. The less I there is, the more life flows through you. When you get yourself out of the way, you become a clear channel for infinite intelligence, infinite love, infinite supply, the truth that sets you free. Why is this truth never told? Because our entire economic and social system depends on keeping you identified with the personal self. If you truly died to self, you would stop being manipulated by fear. You would stop buying things you don't need to fill an inner emptiness. You would stop accepting less than your divine inheritance because someone told you that you weren't enough. The ego, both personal and collective, fears this teaching more than any other. It knows that if you discover who you really are, its reign of tyranny ends. But here is the beautiful paradox. In dying to self, you don't lose anything real. You only lose your suffering, your limitation, your false sense of separation. What remains is your true self, eternal, unshakable, infinitely resourceful, permanently at peace. Your invitation. I invite you today to begin the practice of self-observation. Watch the movements of the personal self without judgment. Notice how it constantly seeks security, validation, and control. See how it creates suffering through its endless commentary and comparison. And in those moments of clear seeing, ask yourself, who is aware of this self? Who is watching these thoughts? That aware presence that you discover, that is what you really are. That awareness has never been born and can never die. It is not troubled by circumstances, not diminished by loss, not inflated by gain. As you rest more and more in this awareness, the personal self begins to lose its grip. Its death is not violent but gentle, like ice melting into water, and what emerges is freedom, not freedom for the self, but freedom from the self. Contemplation today, you stand at a threshold. Behind you is a lifetime of identifying with a false self, of struggling and striving to make that self secure and significant. Before you is the pathless path of awakening, where you discover that you were never separate, never lacking, never in danger. The choice is always yours. You can continue to worship at the altar of the personal self, believing that your happiness depends on its success. Or you can begin the beautiful process of dying to self and awakening to your true nature. This death is not an end. It is the beginning of real life. It is the doorway to peace that passes understanding, to love without opposite, to a joy that doesn't depend on circumstances. The truth is, you have never been the small, separate self you think you are. You have always been the infinite awareness in which all life appears. The only question is, are you ready to stop believing the lie and awaken to the truth? The masters throughout the ages whisper the same message: die to self and live forever, lose your life and find it, surrender the false and inherit the real. This is the truth never told, hidden in plain sight, waiting for those with ears to hear and eyes to see. May you find the courage to die daily to the false self, that you might discover the immortal self that you have always been. In the stillness beyond thought, in the silence beyond words, truth reveals itself, not as something to be grasped by the mind, but as the very ground of your being. The illusion of personal power, we have been conditioned from birth to believe in the supremacy of personal power. From our earliest days, we are taught that our success depends entirely upon our individual effort, our willpower, our determination to make things happen. This belief becomes so deeply embedded in our consciousness that we never question it. We assume that the more forcefully we assert ourselves, the more control we exert, the more we push and struggle, the greater our results will be. But observe what actually happens in your life. Notice how the things that flow most naturally, the solutions that appear most elegantly, the opportunities that serve you best, these rarely come through force. They arrive in moments of relaxation, in spaces of surrender, when you have temporarily ceased your frantic efforts to control outcomes. This is not coincidence. This is the universe showing you a fundamental truth. Personal power is an illusion that keeps you trapped in limitation. The ego self believes it is the author of your life, the source of your supply, the creator of your good. It takes credit for every success and trembles at every potential failure. But this self is merely a collection of thoughts, memories, and conditioned responses. It has no inherent power at all. It is like a puppet that has forgotten the puppeteer, believing its movements to be self-generated. When you begin to see through this illusion, something remarkable happens. You realize that the real power in your life has never been personal. The intelligence that beats your heart, that heals your wounds, that orchestrates the perfect timing of events. This is not your personal doing. There is a greater intelligence, an infinite power that flows through you when you cease blocking it with the ego's demands and fears. The greatest discovery you can make is this: you don't need personal power because you have access to infinite power. Your only task is to stop obstructing it with the illusion of separation. Surrender as liberation. The word surrender frightens the ego self more than perhaps any other. In our competitive world, surrender suggests weakness, defeat, giving up. We are told never to surrender, to fight to the bitter end, to go down swinging. But this understanding of surrender comes from ignorance of what surrender truly means in the spiritual sense. True surrender is not defeat. It is the most intelligent action you can take. When you surrender, you are not giving up your power, you are acknowledging that your personal, limited self never had the power you thought it did. You are releasing your grip on a rope that was never holding you up in the first place. Surrender means relaxing the fist of control and allowing life to flow through you rather than trying to force life to bend to your will. Consider the analogy of swimming. A person who doesn't know how to swim will panic in deep water, thrashing and fighting, using tremendous energy in a desperate attempt to stay afloat. This very struggle hastens their exhaustion and drowning. But the moment they surrender to the water, relaxing their body and trusting the natural buoyancy, they float effortlessly. The water that seemed like an enemy becomes a support. Life works exactly this way. When you stop fighting reality, when you cease demanding that circumstances be different than they are, when you release your attachment to specific outcomes, this is when you discover freedom. Surrender doesn't mean you become passive or stop taking action. Rather, your action becomes inspired instead of desperate, flowing instead of forced, effective instead of exhausting. The liberated life begins with surrender. You surrender the belief that you know how things should unfold. You surrender the assumption that your limited perspective sees the whole picture. You surrender the exhausting responsibility of trying to control everyone and everything. And in that surrender, you discover that you are held, guided, and provided for by an intelligence far superior to your calculating mind. This is not resignation, this is liberation, this is coming home to your true nature, the silent witness within you, beneath the constant stream of thoughts, emotions, and sensations. There exists a silent witness, a pure awareness that observes all experience without being touched by it. This witness is who you truly are, yet most people never discover it because they are completely identified with what is being witnessed, the thoughts, feelings, and experiences of the personal self. Right now, as you read these words, notice that there is awareness of the reading. Thoughts arise about what you're reading, agreement, disagreement, questions, memories, and there is awareness of those thoughts. Emotions may arise: interest, boredom, excitement, resistance, and there is awareness of those emotions. This awareness itself is perfectly still, perfectly present, untouched by the movements it observes. This is the silent witness, and it is your true self. The personal self is like weather, constantly changing, sometimes stormy, sometimes calm, but never permanent. The silent witness is like the sky, always present, always clear, always spacious enough to hold all weather without being disturbed by it. When you begin to identify with the witness rather than with what is being witnessed, everything changes. Problems don't disappear, but your relationship to them transforms completely. You realize that no circumstance can touch what you truly are. This discovery is not philosophical speculation, it is direct experience available to anyone willing to look. In any moment of stress or confusion, you can pause and ask, who is aware of this stress? Who is observing this confusion? In that moment of inquiry, you step back from identification with the personal self and rest in the silent witness. From this position, clarity arises naturally. Solutions appear without force. You find yourself responding to life from wisdom rather than reacting from conditioning. The silent witness has access to infinite intelligence because it is not clouded by the ego's agenda, fears, and limitations. When you learn to live from this place of witnessing awareness rather than from the chattering mind, you tap into a source of guidance that never fails. This is practical mysticism, not escaping from life, but discovering the dimension of yourself that was never trapped in the first place. Living by grace, not force. There are two ways to live, by force or by grace. Most of humanity knows only the way of force, striving, struggling, pushing, manipulating, controlling, exhausting oneself in the attempt to make life yield desired results. This is the way of the personal self, and it leads inevitably to burnout, frustration, and a deep sense that life is hard and you are alone in your struggle. Grace is the opposite of force. Grace is what flows naturally when you align yourself with the deeper current of life rather than swimming against it. Grace is the unexpected help that arrives, the perfect timing you didn't orchestrate, the solution that appears when you stop trying to figure everything out with your limited mind. Grace is what happens when you get out of your own way. But grace is not random or arbitrary. It operates according to a spiritual law as reliable as gravity. Grace flows in proportion to your surrender of personal sense. The more you release the belief that everything depends on your individual effort, the more you discover a power that works through you with far greater effectiveness than you could ever achieve alone. This doesn't mean you stop taking action. It means your action becomes inspired rather than desperate, flowing from inner guidance rather than from fear-based thinking. Living by grace requires a fundamental shift in consciousness. Instead of waking up each day with a mental list of everything you must make happen, you begin your day in stillness, acknowledging the presence of infinite intelligence that knows what you need before you ask. Instead of approaching challenges with tension and worry, you learn to pause and invite wisdom that surpasses your personal understanding. Instead of taking credit when things go well or blame when they don't, you recognize that there is only one power operating, and your role is simply to be transparent to it. The masters of spiritual life have discovered this secret. The less the personal self interferes, the more efficiently life unfolds. When you live by grace, you find yourself in the right place at the right time, meeting the right people, receiving the right ideas. Synchronicities multiply, doors open that you didn't even know existed. This is not magic. It is the natural result of aligning with the intelligence that orchestrates the entire universe, the invisible supply. One of the greatest fears of the personal self is lack. The fear that there is not enough, that resources are limited, that if you don't grab and hoard, you will be left without. This fear drives so much of human behavior: competition, greed, anxiety about the future, reluctance to give or share. The personal self looks at bank accounts, job security, market conditions and concludes that its survival depends entirely on visible, material resources. But there exists an invisible supply that has nothing to do with material circumstances. This supply is infinite, inexhaustible, and constantly seeking expression through you. It is the source of every genuine idea, every creative solution, every act of love and generosity. It is what the mystics call divine abundance, and it has nothing to do with how much money is in your account or how favorable your circumstances appear to be. The invisible supply operates by entirely different principles than the material world. It doesn't decrease when you give, it actually increases. It doesn't depend on economic conditions or human manipulation. It flows most freely to those who have released their fearful grip on material security and learned to trust the infinite source of all supply. This is why some of the most generous, peaceful, and creative people often have very little material wealth, while others with vast resources live in constant anxiety and fear of loss. When the false self dies, when you cease identifying with the limited, separate ego, you gain access to this invisible supply. You discover that you are never without resources, because the source of all resources lives within your own consciousness. Ideas come when you need them. Opportunities appear at the right moment. Help arrives from unexpected quarters. This is not wishful thinking or positive affirmation. This is a spiritual law that can be proven in your own experience. The key to accessing invisible supply is releasing dependency on visible supply. This doesn't mean you ignore practical matters or become financially irresponsible. It means you stop believing that your security and well-being depend ultimately on material conditions. You begin to live from the awareness that consciousness is the source of all manifestation, and as you are one with infinite consciousness, you can never truly lack anything essential to your unfoldment. Living from invisible supply brings a freedom that those identified with material security can never know. You find that you can give generously without fear of depletion. You can share your gifts freely without demanding specific returns. You can pursue your true calling without the paralyzing question, "But how will I survive?" The answer is always the same. The invisible supply that has sustained you thus far will continue to sustain you, and usually in ways far more elegant and abundant than your limited planning could have arranged. Conclusion. The invitation to awakening, my friends. We have journeyed together today through territory that most never dare to explore. We have looked directly at the uncomfortable truth that the self we think we are, this collection of thoughts, fears, ambitions, and defenses, is not our true identity at all. We have examined how this false self is the source of every limitation, every suffering, every sense of separation that haunts human existence. But more importantly, we have glimpsed the magnificent truth that lies beyond this illusion, that you are not a small, separate wave struggling in an indifferent ocean, but the ocean itself, expressing through this unique form. You are not a fragment of consciousness trying to survive in a vast universe, but the very consciousness in which the universe appears. This is not philosophy. This is not religious dogma. This is practical, demonstrable truth that can be verified in your own experience. Right now, in this very moment, the awareness that is reading these words, that is present to all experience, that awareness is untouched by any problem, unlimited by any circumstance, undiminished by any loss. That awareness is what you are. The death of the false self is not something to fear. It is the most natural, the most inevitable, and the most liberating event that can occur in consciousness. Every moment of peace you have ever experienced has come when this false self temporarily relaxed its grip. Every moment of true joy, every experience of genuine love, every flash of creative insight, all of these have emerged from the space beyond personal self. What I am inviting you to is not a weekend project or a self-improvement program. I am inviting you to a complete revolution in consciousness, a fundamental shift in who you take yourself to be. This shift doesn't happen all at once for most people. It is a gradual awakening, a progressive dying to the old and being born into the new. But you can begin today. You can begin right now. In this very moment you can stop identifying with the voice in your head that comments on everything, judges everything, resists everything. You can notice that there is awareness of that voice, and that awareness is your true nature. You can practice the pause of consciousness, that sacred moment of stopping before reacting, where infinite intelligence has the opportunity to flow through you. You can begin to live by grace rather than force, surrendering your agenda and allowing life to unfold through you rather than constantly trying to bend life to your will. You can begin to trust the invisible supply, releasing your fearful grip on material security and discovering that consciousness itself is the source of all good. This teaching is not for everyone. Many will hear these words and turn away, preferring the familiar suffering of the personal self to the unknown freedom of dying to self. The ego will always choose a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven. But for those who are ready, for those who have reached the end of their rope with the old way of living, for those who sense that there must be something more, for you, this message is a lifeline. The truth is that you are already free. You have always been free. The bondage was only ever in belief, never in reality. The separate self that seems so solid, so real, so much in need of protection and promotion, it is nothing more than a phantom, a shadow, a dream character that you have mistaken for yourself. Waking up from this dream doesn't require years of effort or special techniques or guru initiation. It requires only this, a willingness to see what is actually true, a willingness to question your most fundamental assumptions about who you are, a willingness to let go of the known and rest in the unknown. As you go forward from this moment, I encourage you to be gentle with yourself. The dying to self is not accomplished through force or self-criticism. It happens through understanding, through awareness, through compassion for the struggles of the false self, even as you see through its unreality. Be patient with the process. Some days you will feel liberated and free, other days the old patterns will reassert themselves with surprising strength. This is normal. This is part of the journey. Remember that you are not doing this alone. The very impulse to awaken, the very attraction you feel to this teaching, this is the infinite self calling itself home. The intelligence that beats your heart and guides the planets in their orbits is the same intelligence that is orchestrating your awakening. Trust it, surrender to it, let it live your life. In closing, I leave you with this contemplation. What would it be like to live without the burden of defending and maintaining a separate self? What would it be like to move through your day without the constant internal commentary and judgment? What would it be like to face challenges without fear, to give without expecting return, to love without condition, to act without attachment to outcome? This is not a fantasy. This is your birthright. This is what becomes possible when the false self dies and the true self is allowed to live through you. This is the freedom that passes all understanding, the peace that doesn't depend on circumstances, the joy that has no opposite. The door stands open. The invitation has been extended. The only question that remains is, will you walk through? Die to self and discover the deathless. Release the false and inherit the real. Let go of the dream and awaken to reality. This is the truth never told, and now you have heard it. What you do with it is between you and the infinite. May you have the courage to follow this truth wherever it leads, knowing that every step toward dying to self is a step toward the life you were always meant to live. In the silence beyond all words, in the stillness beyond all thought, in the awareness that has no beginning and no end, there you are, and there you have always been. Welcome home. Be still, and know that I am God, not the personal you, but the I that you truly are, infinite, eternal, free. There comes a moment in one's spiritual journey when the words, "You are the temple of the living God," cease to be a line of scripture and begin to vibrate with life within your own being. It is not a statement of poetic beauty, it is the revelation of what you are. You have been taught to look outward, to seek God in rituals, in buildings, in sacred mountains or distant heavens. Yet the true sanctuary has never been built by human hands. It is the silent, radiant awareness at the center of your own being. Within you dwells the same presence that formed the stars and whispered light into the void. This is not metaphor, it is actuality. The mind that sees itself as a limited creature, striving, fearing, desiring, cannot grasp this. But in the stillness, when thought subsides and you no longer search for God as something apart, the veil lifts. You begin to feel a current of peace, quiet yet infinite, that needs no words and no defense. That is the living God moving as your very life. You were never a mortal body carrying a spark of divinity. You are the infinite life expressing as form. The temple is not in your chest. It is the whole of your consciousness when freed from separation. Every breath, every heartbeat, every act of love or forgiveness becomes worship. When you walk, the temple walks. When you speak truth, the altar glows. The tragedy is that nobody told you this truth, though it has been inscribed in your soul since the beginning. You were told to improve yourself, to earn heaven, to become worthy. Yet how can the ocean become more oceanic? How can the sun learn to shine? All striving ends when you awaken to what already is. You are not becoming divine, you are remembering divinity. Let this awareness govern your days. Do not attempt to invite God into your life. Realize that your life is the movement of God. When pain arises, see it as a shadow cast by the belief in separation. Rest again in the quiet, knowing that you are never apart, never alone. The temple of the living God is not made holy by prayer or ritual, but by the recognition that there is no you and God, only God appearing as you. In that revelation, heaven is found here and now. The divine presence resides within you. God is not found in external places, rituals, or doctrines. The true temple of the living God is within your own consciousness. You are not separate from God. The divine is not something to be attained or invited. It is your very essence, the life and awareness expressing itself as you. Silence reveals the truth. When thought and striving cease, the living presence of God is felt as peace and stillness within the direct experience of divine life. Spiritual awakening is remembering, not becoming. You are not evolving toward divinity, but awakening to what has always been true. You are already the expression of infinite life. Living as the temple means living in awareness. Every act of love, truth, and every forgiveness becomes an expression of holiness when you recognize that God lives, moves, and breathes as you. The divine presence within you is not a concept to be believed. It is a reality to be experienced. When you hear the words, "You are the temple of the living God," it is not meant to inspire pride or separation. It is an awakening to what already dwells within you. The presence that created the heavens and earth did not stop creating. It continues its creation through you, as you. Every breath, every heartbeat is evidence of that infinite life expressing itself in form. The mistake humanity has long made is to look outward, to seek divinity in sacred places, in books, in doctrines, forgetting that all sacredness begins within consciousness. From childhood, the mind is trained to identify with the outer shell, the body, and its fleeting experiences. It learns to measure life through possessions, status, approval, and fear. Yet the body is not the temple. It is merely the outer courtyard. The true temple is your awareness, that silent, luminous space within which every thought, feeling, and perception arises. When you turn your attention inward, beyond the noise of thought and emotion, you begin to sense something still, alive, and unchanging. That is not an idea of God, it is the living presence itself. This realization is not reserved for saints or mystics. It belongs to every soul willing to listen within. The divine presence does not choose certain people. It reveals itself wherever consciousness is still enough to perceive it. You do not need to earn it through effort or purity. You only need to recognize that it has been there all along. The temple of the living God is never built. It is discovered. And once discovered, it transforms the ordinary into the sacred. The same hands that once labored in anxiety now move with quiet strength. The same eyes that saw division now see unity in all things. When you understand that the divine dwells within, a great reversal takes place. You no longer pray to reach God. You rest in the awareness that you can never be apart from Him. Every experience, joy or pain, success or failure, becomes a doorway to remembrance. Even in moments of darkness, the inner temple remains intact, untouched by circumstance. The presence within does not flicker when life becomes turbulent. It is the unmoved witness, the eternal peace beneath the waves. To live as the temple of the living God is to live from that awareness. It is to carry a silent reverence into every encounter, not as a display of holiness, but as an effortless recognition of truth. You no longer react from fear, for you know that divine life sustains and moves through all things. You no longer condemn, for you see that every person is a living expression of the same presence. In this awareness, love ceases to be an act of will, it becomes your natural state. Compassion flows not because you try to be kind, but because you see no separation between yourself and another. There is a sacred humility that comes with this realization. The ego would like to claim the temple, to feel important for being divine, but the truth dissolves all self-importance. The living presence cannot be possessed. It possesses you. When you yield to it, the burden of personal striving lifts. You discover a life guided not by human will, but by divine intelligence. Each moment becomes a quiet unfolding of grace, and every step, however small, is filled with meaning. In the awareness of this truth, even the simplest acts, a breath, a smile, a word spoken in love, become offerings upon the altar of life. There is no need for elaborate rituals, for the presence itself is prayer. When you awaken to the living God within, the temple is illuminated from within, and you realize that the journey was never about finding God, but about awakening to what has always been God expressing as you. The truth that you are not separate from God is one of the most liberating revelations a soul can experience. Humanity has lived for centuries with the illusion of distance, God above, man below, heaven far away, earth exiled from light. This illusion has created a world of striving, guilt, and unending spiritual hunger. Yet the separation never existed. There is no gap to bridge, no path to travel to reach the divine. What you call God is not a being apart from you. It is the essence of your own being, the very life that animates and sustains you. When this realization dawns, the walls between heaven and earth crumble, and you awaken to the truth that the kingdom of God was never elsewhere, it has always been within. The mind cannot grasp this unity, for the mind is the instrument of duality. It sees subject and object, self and other, life and death. It defines through comparison, and so it must always perceive distance. But beyond the mind's activity lies pure awareness, the silent presence that simply is. This awareness does not belong to you, it is you. It is the same awareness that looked through the eyes of the prophets, the mystics, and the saints. It is the eternal consciousness that knows no birth or death. When you rest in this awareness, even for a moment, you touch eternity. You are not a fragment of divinity wandering through a hostile world. You are the whole presence expressing itself through an individual form, just as the ocean expresses itself in each wave. The wave may appear to be separate, but it has never left the ocean. Its movement, its rise and fall, its power, all come from the ocean itself, so it is with you. The divine is the source, the life, the mind, and the substance of all that you are. To think of yourself as separate is to live as a wave denying the ocean, to fear its own return to the depths. But when the illusion fades, there is peace in knowing that every motion, every experience, is God unfolding through you. When you begin to see this, all striving to reach God ceases. You no longer pray to a distant power or plead for divine intervention. You turn inward in quiet recognition that every breath you take is the breath of the infinite. Prayer becomes communion, not petition. It becomes a silent resting in the realization that there is nothing to ask for because nothing is lacking. The divine presence is complete, and because you are one with it, you too are complete. The outer world may shift and change, but the essence remains unaltered. This awareness does not remove you from the world, it deepens your presence within it. When you see that you are not separate from God, you also see that no one else is. Every person, every creature, every leaf upon the tree, every drop of rain, is the same life manifesting in different forms. Compassion ceases to be an effort. It becomes the natural expression of understanding. You no longer judge others by appearances, for you see through the veil of form into the light that lives within them. The quarrels and divisions of the world lose their power, for you know that behind every conflict the same divine essence seeks to recognize itself. This realization transforms fear. The fear of death dissolves, for what can die when life itself is your identity? The fear of loss disappears, for how can the infinite lose anything? Even sorrow softens, for though pain may still pass through you, it is no longer personal. It is seen as part of the vast movement of divine experience. You begin to live with an inner stillness that no outer circumstance can disturb. To know that you are not separate from God is to step out of illusion and into truth. It is to awaken from the dream of being a creature striving for light and to realize that you are the light itself. You cease to search for meaning because meaning is the very nature of your being. You cease to seek love because love is what you are. This is not an attainment, but a remembering the rediscovery of what has always been true. In that remembrance, life becomes sacred, not because something new has entered it, but because you have finally opened your eyes to see that everything, including yourself, is God in expression. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of something infinitely greater. It is the sacred space in which the living God reveals himself. In silence, thought ceases its restless motion, and the soul begins to hear the whisper that has always been speaking beneath the noise of the world. It is in this stillness that truth dawns, not through study, argument, or belief, but through direct experience. When the mind grows quiet, a deeper intelligence begins to move, and you realize that what you sought outside has been living within you all along. The presence of God is not discovered through effort. It is uncovered when all effort ends. The human mind is addicted to sound, motion, and meaning. It seeks answers, explanations, and control. Yet the divine cannot be captured in words or forms, for it transcends them. The mind tries to understand God as an object, something to grasp, but in silence you see there is no object and no one to grasp it. There is only awareness itself, infinite and self-sustaining. This awareness does not need to be improved or purified. It simply needs to be recognized. The silence that reveals God is not an external quiet, but an inner stillness, a surrender of resistance and striving. When you sit in this stillness, you begin to feel a living presence that is gentle yet immense. It does not come to you, it emerges from you. It is not something added to life, it is the essence of life itself. Thoughts may still arise, sensations may come and go, yet beneath them remains an unchanging peace, untouched and eternal. That peace is not yours alone, it is the peace of God expressing through you. In that awareness, the line between human and divine dissolves. You realize you are not a seeker of God. You are the awareness through which God is knowing himself. In silence, all illusions of separation fade. The boundaries between you and the world, between spirit and matter, vanish like mist in the morning sun. What remains is the pure experience of being unconditioned, whole, radiant. It is from this state that wisdom flows. True guidance does not come from mental calculation or external authority, but from the inner voice that speaks in the language of stillness. It is never hurried, never anxious, never uncertain. It moves in perfect harmony with the rhythm of life. To live in this awareness is to live from the center of peace, even as the outer world swirls with noise and confusion. You may find yourself surrounded by turmoil, yet inwardly you remain unmoved, for your foundation is not in circumstance, but in presence. Every challenge becomes an invitation to return to silence, to remember the still point within. There, divine strength renews itself effortlessly. You do not have to create peace, you only need to stop disturbing it. The silence is always there, waiting for your attention to rest in it. This silence is not passive, it is creative. Out of it flows inspiration, love, healing, and clarity. Every act born of silence carries a sacred power because it arises not from the restless mind, but from divine consciousness. When you speak from this stillness, your words heal rather than wound. When you act from it, your actions align with the harmony of the whole. Even the simplest gestures, a smile, a touch, a breath, become instruments of grace. The world teaches noise as life and silence as emptiness, yet the opposite is true. Noise is emptiness, disguised as fullness. Silence is fullness, disguised as emptiness. In the quiet, you discover that life is not happening to you, it is flowing through you. The same intelligence that guides the stars and seasons moves in your breath and heartbeat. To be still is to know this truth beyond thought. You do not need to withdraw from the world to experience divine silence. It is present in the midst of activity, in the pause between breaths, in the space between words, in the awareness behind every thought. The temple of the living God is built not of stone or sound, but of silence itself. When you dwell there, you are no longer tossed about by life's changes, for you have found the unchanging within the changing. In that stillness, you awaken to your true nature, and you see that the silence is not empty, it is alive with God. Spiritual awakening is not a process of becoming something new. It is the remembrance of what has always been true. From the moment of birth, the divine essence has been present within you, whole, complete, and perfect. Yet, through the conditioning of the world, you began to identify with what is temporary: the body, the mind, the story, the name. You were taught that divinity was far away, that heaven was a reward to be earned, that you must become pure or worthy enough for grace. But truth is not found at the end of striving. It is discovered when the striving stops, when you turn inward and realize that you were never apart from God. You do not awaken to something that was missing, you awaken from the dream that it was ever missing. The soul is not a traveler moving toward light. It is the light itself, temporarily obscured by the clouds of false belief. When those clouds disperse, not through effort but through surrender, the radiance that has always been shining is revealed. That is awakening, not an achievement, but an unveiling. The one who sought enlightenment disappears, and only awareness remains. You discover that all along, the divine presence has been living your life, breathing your breath, beating your heart. The ego imagines itself as the doer, the seeker, the struggler, but it was only a shadow cast upon infinite consciousness. When the light of remembrance shines, even the shadow becomes luminous. This remembrance does not come from intellectual study or accumulation of spiritual knowledge. Words and concepts can point the way, but they cannot reveal the truth. The mind cannot awaken, for it exists only as movement within awareness. Awakening occurs when awareness recognizes itself, when you see clearly that the observer and the observed are one. It is the moment when the mirror no longer reflects a separate image, but reveals the face of the eternal. When you awaken to your divine essence, nothing in the outer world necessarily changes, yet everything feels transformed. The same sun rises and sets, the same people cross your path, the same body walks through the same life, but now all is seen through new eyes. Every encounter becomes sacred, every sound a hymn, every breath a prayer. You no longer feel bound by the passage of time, for you have touched the timeless. The weight of striving falls away because there is nowhere to go, nothing to reach, and nothing to fix. You realize that perfection was never lost, it was simply unseen. This remembrance brings freedom. You are free from the tyranny of self-improvement, from the endless cycle of guilt and effort. You are free from fear, for fear can only exist where there is separation. You are free from judgment, for you no longer divide the world into sacred and profane, good and bad, divine and human. All is one expression of the same presence. Even pain becomes sacred when seen in this light, for it too belongs to the dance of awakening. The fire that seems to burn is the same fire that purifies. In this awareness, the idea of becoming holy dissolves. You cannot make yourself divine any more than a wave can make itself oceanic. You can only realize that you already are. This realization is not arrogance, it is humility of the highest order, for the you who claims ownership vanishes. The divine lives as you, but not for your glory, only for its own unfolding. You become transparent, allowing the light to shine through without distortion. Every action becomes spontaneous, every word flows from silence, every movement is guided by the rhythm of divine intelligence. This remembrance also transforms your relationship with others. When you see yourself as divine consciousness expressing in form, you see the same truth in everyone you meet. The boundaries between self and other dissolve into compassion. You no longer seek love because you perceive love as the essence of being itself. In recognizing your true nature, you recognize theirs, and all interaction becomes communion. To awaken is not to escape the human experience, but to live it from the perspective of eternity. The body may age, the world may change, but the awareness within remains untouched. You no longer fear the end of the body, for the life that you are cannot die. It was never born and can never cease. You live not as a seeker of truth, but as truth expressing itself in the miracle of existence. This is the real meaning of awakening. It is not the beginning of a spiritual journey, but the end of the illusion that there ever was one. To live as the temple of the living God is to live in a continual state of awareness, where every breath, every gesture, every moment becomes an expression of divine life. It is not a posture of holiness or an outward display of spirituality. It is the quiet recognition that all life is sacred because all life is one. The temple is not a place you visit or a condition you achieve. It is the realization that your very being is the dwelling place of the infinite. When this awareness dawns, ordinary living is transfigured. Work becomes prayer, silence becomes communion, and every encounter becomes a meeting with the divine. You begin to walk not as a seeker of God, but as a living manifestation of God's own presence in form. This awareness cannot coexist with forgetfulness. When consciousness drifts into the illusions of fear, desire, or separation, the temple seems darkened not because the light has gone out, but because the mind has turned away from it. The divine presence never departs, for it is the essence of being itself. To live as the temple is simply to keep turning inward, again and again, until awareness rests naturally in the heart of stillness. There you find that you are not the caretaker of the temple, you are the temple itself, built of spirit and light, animated by the same breath that sustains the universe. In this way of living, prayer ceases to be words spoken to a distant God. Prayer becomes listening, a deep inward attunement to the quiet guidance that arises from the center of being. It may come as peace, as intuition, or as a gentle impulse toward love. The divine life expresses through you spontaneously, without need for thought or decision. Every act, from the smallest kindness to the greatest sacrifice, flows effortlessly when born of this awareness. You are no longer the doer of deeds, you are the transparency through which divine will moves. This surrender does not weaken you, it empowers you, for your strength is no longer limited to the personal. To live in awareness is to see with eyes unclouded by judgment. You begin to perceive the sacred in what the world calls ordinary. The stranger on the street, the child's laughter, the wind through the trees, all reveal the same radiance once you know how to look. You cannot confine the divine to a church or scripture, for the living God has filled the whole of creation. When you walk in awareness, every place becomes holy ground. You realize that worship is not confined to moments of prayer, but is the essence of living itself. The simplest acts, a smile, a word of truth, a moment of forgiveness, become offerings upon the altar of consciousness. This state of awareness also transforms how you face suffering. Pain may still visit the body, and challenges may still arise, but they no longer disturb the sanctuary within. You know that the divine presence remains untouched by circumstances. Even in sorrow, there is peace, for you sense that behind every experience lies the same infinite love seeking to express and reveal itself. To live as the temple is to let life move through you without resistance, trusting that every experience, whether joyous or painful, serves the unfolding of divine purpose. When awareness becomes steady, love becomes effortless. You do not try to love. You simply cannot help but love, for you see only yourself, your true self, in everyone. The divisions that once seemed real fade into unity. You no longer act out of duty, but from the natural outpouring of compassion. The heart that knows itself as the dwelling place of God cannot harbor hatred or envy, for it recognizes that there is no other. All is the one life expressing in infinite diversity, and that recognition is the beginning of peace on earth. To live as the temple of the living God is not to withdraw from the world, but to sanctify it by your awareness. Wherever you are, you carry the presence with you. Your home becomes a sanctuary, your work a ministry, your relationships instruments of grace. The light within you blesses everything it touches, not through will, but through being. This is the quiet miracle of true awareness. You need not speak of God, for your presence becomes the proof. As you live in this realization, the distinction between sacred and secular dissolves. There is no longer a time for prayer and a time for action, for all of life becomes prayer in motion. You are the temple, and the altar is your heart, where the eternal flame burns without ceasing. Every breath fans its glow, every thought of gratitude feeds its light. And though the world may pass by unaware, your mere existence becomes a silent benediction, a reminder that the living God is not far off in heaven, but dwelling, shining, and loving through every awakened soul. When at last you awaken to this truth, not as a belief, but as a living experience, life itself becomes transformed. You cease to search for God in distant heavens or sacred words, for you have found the eternal sanctuary within your own being. The walls of separation fall away, and what remains is stillness, love, and a deep, unshakable peace. You realize that every breath is a prayer, every heartbeat a hymn, and every moment an unfolding revelation of divine presence. The outer world may continue to move in its rhythm of change, but within you burns the light that does not flicker. You walk quietly through life, knowing that wherever you stand, the temple of the living God stands also. And in that awareness, heaven is no longer a promise, it is the reality of now.